This is Laugh or Death, hosted by keynote speaker Paul Ozenkup.
What if the number one driver of workplace well-being that takes an organization from being good to being great was just fun? Well, according to Fortune's Great Place to Work survey and study, they analyze all aspects of company culture, and they found that if an organization is already reached their kind of second best status of being a good place to work, then the thing that gets them to being a great place to work, the top tier, is fun. Do I work at a fun place? And that driver of workplace well-being, we're talking about out of all the other questions on their survey, like benefits and flexible schedules and trust and fairness and all that other kind of stuff, that people said that if they already work at a good place, fun was the number one driver that got them from good to great. And this is a study of nearly 1.2 million people across like a variety of industries. So in this episode of Laugh or Death, we are going to pick up where we left off after episode 10 when we were talking about humor and leadership and get back to our LAFTER model, our LAFTER model. And we already did, episode 10 was all about the L, the leading by example and humor and leadership. So I want to see if we can cover the AFTER and talk about overall, how do we use humor at work to create a company culture of fun and humor and levity that helps drive workplace wellness. So in our LAFTER model, the A stands for ask for help. Like, you don't have to do this all on your own. You know, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself like, all this humor stuff, man, this is great, but I'm just not that funny, then you're probably right. Maybe you're just really self-aware and you already know that. I don't know. Maybe I haven't even met you. But you don't have to be funny in order to use humor at work and to create a lighter environment at work. You can ask for help in a lot of different ways. Here are a few. You know, when I worked, I was an associate dean of student affairs at the Culinary Institute of America. Now, this is like the Harvard of culinary schools, very serious. And our dean of education was certified master chef Russell Scott. And he was a very serious guy. I remember he called me in his office on my second day on the job. And I was like, oh, how sweet. He wants to check in with me and see how I'm doing. No, he asked me because I had stubble. I hadn't shaved, just like a little stubble. And he was like, what's this? And I'm like, and he's like, hey, look, our students have a uniform that they need to adhere to in standards. And if our staff's not doing it, you know what? And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, man, this is like so serious. But I get it. Like, kitchen culture, chef culture, it is very serious. It's based on military brigade. So I get why they're so serious. But I used to have a great time with Chef Scott, and I would call him. I'd call him the dean of cuisine. I'd go into his office like, "Hey, what's up? It's the dean of cuisine. How you doing? Whatever." I would joke around with him a lot. And I remember one day I was in his office and joking around with him, and he said, "You know, Paul, you joke around with me a lot. You're not afraid to have a little fun at my expense, but not a lot of other people around here do that. You know, why do you think that is? Everyone thinks I'm so serious." And I'm like, well, because you're scary, dude. You are serious. And, you know, you walk around with knives like he's a chef. And part of it was his role. He's supposed to be serious. But I remember he told me, he said, well, you know how you give me crap sometimes privately. He goes, feel free to do that in front of the rest of the staff every now and then. Don't be shy to do that. And I thought that was such a brilliant insight that he knew, having a sense of humor might not be my cup of tea at work, or maybe that's not an easy thing for me to do, but I can take a joke and kind of giving me permission and tapping into something that comes naturally to me as someone on his team to do that. And then I remember we were in a meeting, and he was talking about having some pride in our surroundings and like, hey, when we're walking through the main area of the student center, like, let's push in chairs and just like, let's keep this place looking nice. And he said, when I was in the bathroom, there's water all over the counter and all over the mirror. So, I'll take a towel and I'll scrub that mirror. And I go, hey, chef, that no matter how hard you scrub that mirror, it's going to be that same reflection looking back at you, right? And the whole rest of the staff was like, oh. And he just looks over at me and goes, good one. And the rest of the staff, you could just like feel the audible sigh of relief, like, oh, like a nice laugh of like, oh, good, you're not going to die. Okay, great. Because at first, I'm thinking like, I'll go get my stuff. But it was a great moment of him being able to be like, see, look, I can take a joke. And he was, kind of asked me for a little help of like, hey, it's okay for us to be a little lighter around here. I'm just not that great at it. Another way that you can, as a leader in an organization, or just regardless of your role, is thinking about doing something comedians call punching it up. Like when comedians are working on their material, we'll take a concept, a joke, and we haven't really found what's funny yet, or maybe we've tried it a couple times, but it's not great. It's like, oh, let's punch it up a little bit and see if we can figure that out. So you can do that with work stuff as well. So start with presentations, trainings, onboarding things you're doing with people, orientations, meetings, and think about how could I punch this up? How could I add a little fun or humor into this thing that we're doing? And I would say, start with the boring first and get that out of the way. Like create your boring presentation or your boring training first and make sure you're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's and you've got your learning objectives and all that kind of stuff. I'm a comedian and a keynote speaker about humor, and I do this when I'm preparing my speeches and my trainings. I start with the boring framework first. I'm like, all right, I've got my learning objectives. This is what I want the audience to get out of this. Anything I'm tailoring specific to that group, I make sure that's in there. And then I go back and go, all right, now I get to have a little fun. Like now it's like, where do I get to insert some jokes and funny stories and, fun stuff for us to do? Because then I know I've got the content I need. And so you can create your kind of boring outline of whatever it is first. And then if you need help punching it up, like, okay, how do I add humor to this? Of course, you can always use AI or the internet or whatever to come up with like, could I find a funny meme or joke about, this topic? If you use AI, I would just be careful of like, AI is not that funny, man. So you might run it by some funny people first, but we can use other people and other tools to solve problems on our own. Like, look, if you have a lot of problems that you just can't solve on your own, that just means you're human. Or a math book. Okay, now that joke right there, I'll be honest, that is the one joke I've ever asked AI to write for me. And even at that, it didn't even write it that well. But I asked AI for the purposes of this, I asked AI to write a joke about having, needing help solving a problem. And that's what it came up with. But the way that it wrote it was more like a dad joke. It was like, why did the math book ask for help? Because it had too many problems and couldn't solve them all on its own. So that's why you might ask somebody who is naturally funny to see if you can, if you use AI, see if you can use whatever AI gives you to tighten it up or punch it up a little bit. Because, what I did is just try to make the funniest part at the end. So like, it just means you're human or a math book. It's still kind of a weak joke, but you get the idea. You can get some inspiration and stuff from AI or just get some videos or whatever from the internet that are around whatever theme you're looking for that are funny. But another way to ask for help is every organization has at least one person, a lot of times multiple people, that are like the company comic that are always making people laugh or sending people the funniest memes or videos anyway. So harness that energy for good instead of evil, right? Like tap into their energy and have them, ask them to plan a fun way to start your next meeting, or say, hey, could you add a joke to our meeting agenda every week? If they're like me, if they're like the way I always was at work, they're going to be like, oh yeah, all right, okay, I love to do that. It's just kind of the way it is. So you can use their enthusiasm as traction instead of distraction. You could also ask outside experts. If you are planning an event or you feel like we've got a really dynamic company culture, but we're just not having that much fun, or I'd like to add a spark of levity or humor or fun to our next event. It's why I have a job. People plan an event and they are doing a lot of industry specific or technical, breakout sessions or trainings and that kind of stuff. And they're like, you know what, we want to start this event off with something really fun or funny or get people connected and having a good time first. Or maybe we want to end on that note. Or maybe we want an MC who can carry through the whole event to make it fun and funny throughout the event. So you can ask an outside expert for that help. Or if you are bringing a consultant or a trainer to your workplace for something, and you value humor and fun, and you think that would be of benefit to your staff, then ask them, like, how will you make this day fun for us? How do you use humor in what you do? Like, make it a criteria for who you're hiring if that's important to you. Okay, so that's asking for help. It doesn't have to all be on you. This doesn't have to be a covert mission like, I listened to this Laugh or Death podcast, or I read Paul's book, and now it's all on me to make the workplace funnier. No, man, ask for help. Ask the people around you. Say, like, hey, I want this place to be more fun and use humor more. How can we do that? There will be people that will help you. Okay, so we've got the L and the A. Now the F. The F in our laughter model stands for fun over funny. You don't always have to try to be hilarious. Thinking like, oh man, I got to come up with a bunch of jokes or entertain people, that kind of stuff. That is not what you have to do. I started with that statistic about the largest driver of workplace well-being being people saying whether or not they feel like they work in a fun environment. And so creating fun really helps. And fun and humor are not the same thing, but they hang out at the same parties. Because when we get people doing fun, novel, new things, even silly things, then a lot of times funny things happen. Your naturally funny people start doing and saying funny things, and we get that humor. But I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, if I want to have humor at work, it's on me to be like making jokes and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't want, not on my watch, I don't want a bunch of like Michael Scotts from The Office out there making workplaces feel cringeworthy, making people's eyes roll all the time and trying way too hard. So think fun over funny. Get your people doing fun stuff. And rather than going through all the way, I could go through in my book, The Humor Habit, I've got 101 ways to have more fun at work that's in there. And I've got some guidelines on the fundamentals of fun. But here's what, rather than doing all that on the podcast, if you're like me, it's nice to have a visual. So I've got a free PDF, a fun over funny PDF that you can download. It's in the show notes. You can click on it and download that. That is like a free thing for you. You can look through it, and hopefully some of those references in there will be helpful of like, oh, here's an idea of how I can have a little bit more fun at work. And so it's got a lot of ideas of just how to use fun to, build a team culture that people actually enjoy being a part of, and how to use humor without losing trust. So yeah, it's in the show notes. Go ahead and click on that and download that. So we got the LAF. Now the T in laughter is tell your story. So if we've talked about before on the podcast, like if life with more levity is important to you, whether it's at work or in life in general, then it should be a part of the story you tell. There should be some indications to other people that that's your vibe that you're putting out there, and you want to send those signals out. But what about, that's about as an individual, but what about as an organization, or what about your workplace? Like, how does your organization tell the story that, hey, a sense of humor is important to us here. We value humor and fun at our work, and we want that to be part of our organizational culture and identity. Because there's a survey of over 700 CEOs across multiple industries, and they found that 98% of CEOs said they prefer candidates with a sense of humor. Which is like, duh, yes. Wouldn't we all want to work with people with a sense of humor? It makes me wonder, like, who are the 2% of CEOs that were like, absolutely not? I just picture like the Monopoly guy, just like, Sense of humor, you say? That's codswaddle, you know? Of course, we want to work with people who are cool and have a sense of humor. But if that's the case, then how are we gauging for that? How are we hiring for humor? And trying to figure out, will these people kind of vibe with us with our type of humor? So if you want your organization or your workplace to be a fun place where humor is valued, is that the story that you're putting out there that you're telling? How are you recruiting people like that? So one way to start with that is in job descriptions and interviews. And I'm not talking about just putting in your job description like, oh, work hard, play hard mentality, or we're looking for someone with a good sense of humor. And then, having people, tell you that they've got a good sense of humor. Like as a candidate, I'm like, hey man, show me yours first and then I'll show you mine, right? Like if I don't see it from the organization in some way, then like I'm going to go into an interview going, I don't know if I should really use any humor here or not. So rather than just saying you are looking for someone with a good sense of humor in your job descriptions, here's a couple of examples of how they show their sense of humor in a job description. So this is Freedom Trail Realty School. Our ideal candidate will be tech savvy, reliable, knowledgeable about real estate and current regulatory and legal concerns, thoughtful about class structure and curriculum design, a fan of overusing GIFs on Slack. No, seriously, we use a lot of GIFs. That's great. And it gives you just like a little window into, okay, well, they use Slack a lot and they're cool with you kind of throwing some GIFs in there and having a little fun. If you're reading that job description and going, well, what is a GIF? Then maybe that's not the right fit for you. Or if you are super annoyed when people send GIFs over Slack, then you're like, all right, this may not be for me. But if that sounds like, oh yeah, I do that, the current place I work, or I do that with friends over text, like that sounds like my type of people, that might be a good fit. Here's another one. VCA Animal Hospitals. They're looking for a veterinary technician and an internal medicine. And their job description says, we not only work hard, we play hard too. We love a potluck lunch. We practice leaving notes of kindness, go on Starbucks runs, and ice cream magically appears in the freezer from time to time. Our jobs can be stressful, so we expect professionalism while appreciating a good sense of humor. You'll regularly hear knock-knock jokes or dad jokes being exchanged in our treatment room. That is a really good, like I'm picturing what that place would be like to work. I would work there for the ice cream and the dad jokes. Like that'd be just fine. But they're saying like we expect professionalism and our jobs can be stressful, but we also appreciate a good sense of humor. And they just kind of paint a picture of like, this is what it's like here. That's a really good example of telling the story of like, hey, we do like to have a little fun, even though it can get stressful here. Here's an engineering firm. Growing engineering firm looking for a proactive, batteries included engineer or architect to provide hands-on critical thinking skills and building or environmental science. Other assets we're looking for: 4 years of engineering or architectural experience and professional registration. Adaptable and flexible with a sense of humor. Not afraid to use the telephone as a voice tool. I love that. Detail-oriented planner, personable, energetic, and fun to work with. Like the batteries included part at the beginning was just so on brand for an engineering firm. So that was kind of nice. But then the not afraid to use the telephone as a voice tool, dude, I hit it out of the park. That was great. That was really good. And, if you read that and take offense to it, like, hey, you know what? Using the phone gives me a lot of anxiety and I don't appreciate that. That might not be the right place to work for you. But if you looked at that and was like, I get it. That's pretty funny. And hey, I'm good on the phone. Perfect. You're probably going to vibe with them. So then once you're putting that out, and then also using your social media, how do you tell the story about who you are on social media using humor, even if you're in a serious profession? Gosh, I mean, I remember when Obama put out the Obamacare website and it crashed. It didn't work. It was a huge flop at first. And what they did was he then went on Zach Galifianakis, the comedian, on his Between Two Ferns segment and like poked fun at himself about the rollout of Obamacare website. Basically, they relaunched the website, kind of poking fun at himself. And that really worked and helped really well. So that story that they were trying to tell is like, hey, this is serious, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. We made a mistake. Here, the website's working now. The National Park Service is a great example, social media-wise. I wouldn't normally follow the National Park Service on Instagram necessarily, like if they were just like, here's a safety update for Yellowstone, or here's, probably not. But they are a really funny follow on social media. Real sassy, real kind of sarcastic, but then they put out these funny memes, and then they put all their safety information below it so that you get a little bit of both. So you can tell that story regardless of the organization. And then once you are telling that story, like once you've got some job descriptions that you're trying to show people like, hey, we're a cool place to work. Your social media's doing that as well. And you have a great work culture there. Then how do you get candidates that you feel like, okay, well, we want to know that your sense of humor vibes with us as well? Well, that would be in the way that you ask questions in a job interview. Like if working with somebody, with a good sense of humor is important to you, then how are you gauging that when you have them apply? Like, are you asking any questions that get at their sense of humor? And it doesn't have to be many. It could be just one or two, along with all the other questions you ask. So, a couple example questions could be like, what's a funny quirk about you that your new colleagues should know about or be aware of, like a unique hobby or a ridiculous pet peeve, a guilty pleasure, or what's your current food obsession? Just something to, help get to know the person. Or if you could have a superpower in life, what would it be and how would that superpower help you in this job? Or if a song played, every time you entered a room, if a song played, what song would it be and why? Because the answers to those questions in an interview really aren't that important. What's important is the way in which they receive the question and answer in terms of like their playfulness. Are they game to just have a little fun with that question with you and play with you a little bit with that question? And you might learn a little bit about them from the answer to that question, because if they answer in some way that's like totally inappropriate, when I was working at the Culinary Institute, there was a guy that answered an interview question we had really inappropriately when we were hiring for someone to run one of our restaurants. And we asked, like, how do you have fun at work? And he literally said, oh, yeah, well, one place I worked, me and my colleagues, we used to walk by tables and crop dust them. And I was like, I looked over at the other people that were doing the interview and we were like, okay. And I wrote down. And if you're not familiar with what crop dusting is, you just look up on the internet but yeah, not a great interview moment. But I'm glad we asked the question, because I'm thinking to myself, if this is that guy during an interview trying to like show his best self to us, then what's he like every day? Like, no thanks, man. So these could also be like really good questions to just gauge whether or not people's sense of humor is even appropriate. So we've got our LAFTER model, L-A-F-T. The E in our LAFTER model is for earn it. You've got to earn the right to use humor at work. Nobody wants to work with the person who's like never responding to emails or getting their reports done on time, but they're there at every Taco Tuesday function. That is annoying. So it is important that you are prioritizing deadlines over punchlines, and that you are somebody who is reliable to work with and treats people well. Your best at work, your best ability is your reliability. And how you treat people is extremely important before you ever use any type of humor. Because remember, humor is life's sweetener. It's not the main course. So the main course of any organization are values and behaviors. So if we are creating a culture where we communicate well with each other, we treat each other with respect, we value other people's opinions, then the humor will probably mirror that as well. But in an organization where we tolerate toxic behaviors of like mistreatment and alienation and intimidation and harassment and things like that, well, then why would people change their behavior when they use humor? So that's why that study at the beginning of this podcast episode is organizations that are already good can go to great by adding humor and fun. But if your organization is a complete mess and toxic and people aren't treating each other even with respect, we're not even ready for humor, if that makes sense. We've got to earn it just a little bit. Another kind of thing to think about with earning it or using humor positively is just think about the safest and easiest way to use humor positively is humor about yourself and your own experiences. And then kind of the next step up from that, little more risk, but still pretty safe, is humor about shared experiences. Humor about shared experiences can be really powerful in bringing people together. So shared experiences, maybe there's a lot of construction going on at your work right now. And so, jokes about that or this project you're working on or whatever, that can be really powerful. But when it's humor about other people and their experiences, that's when just leave that to the professionals or outside of work stuff. But that is definitely not, it is the highest risk of offending people. And you're also kind of know that you're on the wrong track with your humor and it's probably not appropriate for work if you're using a bunch of disclaimers with your humor, like beforehand. Like if you're like looking over your shoulder, like, you got a second? Okay. And you're like looking to make sure nobody's around before you tell someone some joke or like, hey, I know this is bad, but, or I'm not sexist or anything, but it's probably not a great joke to be telling. Or if you have to say it was just a joke, then you haven't told one. If you have to say if it was just a joke, then the words you're looking for are, I apologize. That's what it was just a joke really means. Okay, so we got LAFTE. Our final letter for our laughter model is rituals. And it's important to think about, like, there's all these ways we can bring fun and humor to work. And there are a lot of organizations that mean well, but what they do is they have like one or two big fun events in a year. The annual company holiday party or something in the summer where we're all getting together outside of work, a big retreat. And those are fun, but they really don't drive a change in company culture or a feeling of I work at a fun place. What does drive that are rituals that happen more often, monthly, weekly, even daily rituals. And companies spend a ton of money on these annual things that don't really drive company culture when you could be doing things weekly or daily that really change culture that are a lot smaller and a lot cheaper. So some examples of monthly rituals might be, depending on your organization, like a desk or area or door decorating contest each month. There's all sorts of different monthly events, and maybe you've got a prize each month for the way people decorate their area. And it could be as serious as, Women's History Month or as silly as like National Yo-Yo Month or whatever. There's a software solutions company called Far Reach, and they have a monthly Far Reach fun day where each month they'll just get together. They'll cut work a little bit short on a Friday and play some games once a month. That is starting to drive company culture. That's like, that's what we do around here. We have a good time. We've got that kind of stuff going on. Weekly rituals could be, there's been organizations I've worked with that do like a wacky sock Wednesday. Everybody wears their funniest socks, and then there's a prize given to the best pair of socks. Or Friday funnies. A lot of places do like Friday funnies where the boss sends out some funny videos or something like that on a Friday. Or maybe you want to do it on Monday to start the week off well, that kind of stuff. And then some daily rituals. I remember when I was working with students with drug and alcohol issues, real serious job. One of my favorite things that I knew was going to happen every day was that one of my colleagues from the office next door was going to come into my office at some point that day, and I had a dartboard, and we would have a pretty competitive game of darts together. And that was, for me, that was great. Whether it was we were talking about a difficult case while we were doing that, or it was going to be at the end of the day, we've both got time and we're going to do our little dart game. That was awesome for me. That was something that was just like a little stress reliever that you could do. There's some organizations will do like a 3:00 song where the only rule is during this song, you have to stop working and take a break. You don't have to dance if you don't want to, but you have to stop what you're doing and maybe walk around, take a break, whatever. And one employee gets to pick the song for that day. That kind of is just like a circuit breaker, little psychological reset. And then we get, back to work after that. So there are all sorts of different rituals that you can put in place. And maybe your workplace already has them and you just want to formalize them just a little bit more. That's what really drives a culture where people feel like, you know what, where we work, this is what we do. We have a good time. We've got all these rituals in place where we do fun stuff pretty regularly rather than like once a year. Oh, we better try to have some fun because we haven't had any all year. So that's our LAFTER model. Lead by example, ask for help, think fun over funny, tell your story, earn it, and rituals. If you put all 6 of those things in place, you can really create a dynamic culture where people are having fun, using humor to drive innovation and connection, and a culture where people might actually enjoy going to work and not cringe and roll their eyes and want to hide from it. So don't forget to grab, I appreciate you listening and following this podcast, but don't forget to grab your free Fun Over Funny guide. It's going to be in the show notes, so feel free to download that and subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Subscribe to the podcast, and please also go to my YouTube channel and subscribe there.
You've been listening to Laugh or Death with Paul Ozencup. If you're planning a conference or event and want something smart, meaningful, and actually funny, book Paul to speak. To learn more or to get a copy of his book, The Humor Habit, visit laughordeath.com.